Ghost of Yōtei is far more complicated than its seeming simplicity lets on. I've spent over 60 hours in this world, exploring every corner, learning every skill, following every story thread, and the more I played, the more I realized that this game is not just a simple revenge story, and also not something you should complete in 25 hours, like most of the reviewers on this platform. Because to rush Ghost of Yōtei is to miss what makes this game so special. Ghost of Yōtei has far more to say than Tsushima, but it says it through hours and not minutes. The depth of its story is woven into everything you do outside the main campaign, and at first that might sound strange, but it gives the side content and the open world a narrative weight that few other games, even its predecessor, can dream of. Atsu carries trauma, guilt, and a burning drive for revenge. Her memories bleed into the present. You walk into a childhood home and suddenly you are there too, a child again, witnessing the horrors that shaped her. You feel her fear, her rage, her humanity. But this isn't a revenge story. It is a story about healing your own inner child, about the broken pieces we all carry from our past, the responsibility we carry to fix ourselves for ourselves. Rush it though, and yes, it feels like a simple revenge story, because the main narrative alone doesn't show the full picture, and that is the double-edged sword of giving the side content so much weight. Everything in Ghost of Yōtei, every duel, every bounty, every hidden corner, it all feeds into the journey of Atsu's character. And the more time you spend in the world, the more Atsu reveals herself. So now, after all the hype and making sure I really take my time to breathe the game in, I think it's a great time to look at the highs of Ghost of Yōtei, the lows of Ghost of Yōtei, and whether or not it lived up to the gargantuan legacy of Ghost of Tsushima, or perhaps even surpassed it. This is Ghost of Yōtei, after the hype.
Been gone so long. Any ideas, boy? Where do we find the rest of the Yōtei 6?
Here is an absolutely wild statistic. 98% of people who watch my videos aren't subscribed. So if you like deep dives into games you love, subscribing really helps me keep investigating more of them. But with that being said, this is how your journey starts, with the entirety of Ezo open to your hunt of the Yōtei 6, free to tackle it in almost any way you see fit. And even early on, it was clear that the open world of Ghost of Yōtei is its greatest strength, because it's not just a beautiful backdrop, it's alive, reactive, and deeply tied to Atsu's story. The first time I returned to her family home and shifted instantly between past and present, I realized how much of this game's world is built around memory. The transition is astonishingly quick, and for as much of a visual spectacle and showcase of the PS5's SSD speed it definitely is, I'd like to think it was done because it captures how memories truly work. Sudden, intrusive, and inescapable. When Atsu walks through a place tied to her trauma, the past isn't distant, it is right there. And what makes Yōtei stand out isn't just how well it tells its story, but how it makes you live it through its open world. Atsu's journey is framed by revenge, but revenge is just the surface. Beneath it, beneath every system and every fleeting conversation with another person, it speaks to something more fragile. The slow and painful act of stitching yourself back together after the world has torn you apart. The night of the burning tree, where the Yōtei 6 brutally murdered Atsu's entire family and she only narrowly escaped from, is a constant cross that she bears. Atsu then throughout the game comes face to face with that past, forcing her to walk through the echoes of who she used to be. When she visits her old home, you don't just watch her remember it, you become her memory. One moment you're the hardened ghost, and the next a child again, small and terrified and powerless. Even when just trying to rest out in camp, Atsu will fall asleep only to be met by the nightmare that was that night. Inside that hardened shell, she is still just a kid that grew up without the love of her mom and the safety of her father. And everywhere you go, the world reminds Atsu what she lost, but also what she's capable of getting back. And that is what makes Ezo so special. The open world doesn't just exist to fill a space, it really reacts to her. People will whisper about her, fear her, and sometimes thank her. Bandits will set up traps to catch the ghost. Townsfolk tell stories of her vengeance spreading across Ezo. It is as though the world itself is mirroring her growing notoriety, testing her resolve and asking again and again, who are you becoming? The irony is that while the world sees her as a ghost, The game's whole premise is about her becoming human again. Every side story you stumble upon, every bounty, every wandering swordsman, a grieving peasant, it all peels back layers of Atsu's own struggle. Each time you choose to help someone or intervene or even spare them, you're reminded of the person she still could be. It's what makes rushing through Ghost of Yōtei such a disservice, when you ignore the beautiful open world Sucker Punch so lovingly crafted by just rushing through the main campaign. To a certain extent, and I'm going to try and say this without sounding utterly cringe, you are ignoring Atsu's healing by doing so. The revenge story is simple: find the Yōtei 6 and kill them, but the real story happens in the spaces found between the main campaign and the open world. In the duels beneath the cherry trees, in the bounties where you meet killers who mirror what Atsu might become. Finding the Ainu, a pacifist group who under no circumstances use violence even when it's justified. In those moments, she isn't just killing enemies or listening to strangers, she's confronting the ghosts of who she used to be and further deciding who she still will become. What I love most about Ezo is how exploring it just feels stress-free. You're not following a minimap or checklists, you're following your instincts. The wind guides you, or a glint in the distance catches your eye. You get to a vantage point and spot interesting things to do and see, and then you just go do them in whatever way you see fit. Crucially though, the game never makes you feel like you're missing out on anything if you happen not to engage with certain side content along the way. It's such a refreshing change from most open worlds that constantly nag the player with objectives scattered around the entire map screen and bombard you with notifications that consistently remind you that you've barely made a dent in the game's progression. Personally, that fear of missing out and constant stress that I'm always somehow behind makes me stop playing a game faster than I can say Assassin's Creed Shadows. Here, discovery feels earned, and you're almost always rewarded for your curiosity, be it with a hot spring that boosts your health and allows you to meditate on your time in Ezo, or with an altar of reflection that gains you a skill point to spend on the almost overwhelming list of various abilities and moves Atsu can eventually pull off. Ghost of Yōtei's gameplay is insanely fluid. Combat is fast and aggressive and free-flowing. There's a constant sense of danger. Bearing in mind that I did play on one of the harder difficulties, enemies attack unpredictably. You can't rely on their patterns. Every encounter keeps you on the edge. There's no downtime, no moment to relax. The combat demands absolute focus, because if your mind wanders, you're dead, especially in the boss fights. It's also wonderfully tactile. When you're surrounded, it feels like a game of chess. You're reading the battlefield, picking out the strongest enemy, isolating them, and then moving methodically through the chaos. There's something so exhilarating about that rhythm. It's reactive, it's instinctive, and brutally satisfying when you manage to conquer a group of 5 or more. You begin believing your own legends when you do shit this cool. Atsu uses different weapon types as a replacement for different stances from the first game. I think this was the right move. It gives the combat a dynamism that personally made Tsushima feel very one-dimensional when I returned back to it after playing Yōtei. The weapons all feel great to use and all have a certain skill gap. One detail I absolutely love is the wolf companion. Occasionally, when you're close to death, she'll appear out of nowhere to help. You can actually form a deeper bond with the wolf by clearing out camps that are hunting other wolves in the area, and as you do this, the frequency of which the wolf appears can increase alongside other abilities that you can unlock, like the wolf joining you in standoffs, which is just chef's kiss. The bounty hunts are another highlight. Each one feels handcrafted, taking place in unique arenas with distinct characters and backstories. Key point being they feel personal and not procedural. And yes, that is a direct jab at Assassin's Creed Shadows with your generic list of AI-generated targets with the soul of a flat tire. Here in Yōtei, you'll find characters with something to say, and no bounty is ever duplicated. I can't believe I'm praising something like this, but it has become so commonplace to make side content just that. Uninteresting busy work with no narrative substance. But here, Sucker Punch clearly took the time to make the open world the star of the show. And that's where I believe Ghost of Yōtei is misunderstood the most. Because so many people rushed the game to get a review out, they really missed out on what they are trying to do here. The world is just as important, if not more important, than the main campaign. Now for all that praise, it isn't all great. Stealth, for example, hasn't evolved at all since Tsushima. To be fair, it's actually disappointingly basic. Enemies follow the same predictable patterns, turning their backs at the perfect time for you to assassinate them. Even on the lethal difficulty, it feels way too easy, more like a waiting game than a test of skill. It feels really bare bones and lackluster compared to the rest of the package, so honestly I often abandon stealth altogether in favor of open combat, which is far more engaging and honestly way more accurate to Atsu's character. Traversal suffers from the same issues. It's functional but uninspired. You just move up and down, grabbing onto clearly marked ledges or hooks. It's turn your brain off traversal. It works, but there's no tension or any player skill required. The analog stick does almost all the work, but hey, at least this game is very pretty to look at. The charm system also feels very cumbersome and out of place in a game like this. Hovering over charms only shows the names, not the effects, so you constantly dig through sub-menus, and with thousands of charms to manage, it often becomes overwhelming, and decision fatigue sets in fast as you try to choose the best charms, but it just feels at odds with a game that so heavily tries not to have you engage with menus in the first place. It's kind of the same problem I have with the new card system. This is how you select your objectives, but for a game that so heavily wants to incentivize not being in menus and exploring with just your eyes, it seems strange that I can't just pull the cards up in the open world. Instead, I have to pause, go into the menu, flip through all the objectives, and nullifying all the work they did to make the open world something that never required a map or a menu in the first place. The game also has an open structure to it, allowing you to tackle each of the Yōtei 6 in whichever way you see fit, for the most part. Now, although this is the best implementation of non-linear open world structure, far exceeding something like Assassin's Creed Shadows, it still suffers many of the same problems that often plague this type of design. The pacing can sometimes feel uneven, a few boss encounters end rather anticlimactically, not because the fight is bad, but because the story isn't ready to let that character die yet. So characters like Lord Saito and the twins, for instance, always seem to escape death at the last second, conveniently surviving until the story decides it's time for them to go. It doesn't ruin the experience, but it does make some of those beats feel a little forced and manufactured. Still, despite those flaws, the gameplay is a step up from Tsushima. It's nothing major, but the combat has more to it. The open world has way more life, and it's all tied together with a main protagonist. There's way more to her than meets the eye. I've spoken a lot about how Atsu's journey and identity are all shaped by the Night of the Burning Tree, but more than that, how the revenge plot is actually just a means to an end. The end being the slow and painful process of healing your own inner child. When you meet the Matsumai commander and realize he's Atsu's long-lost brother, everything changes. That's when the revenge plot flips on its head, because what Atsu thought she knew, what she built her entire identity around, it isn't actually true. This happens often in Ghost of Yōtei. Atsu's worldview is constantly destabilized by reveals that force her to look inward. The Kitsune turning out to be an ally is one such moment, someone with her own reasons and her own pain. Atsu is then made to confront her own assumptions and the harsh truth that not every wound in the world needs to be avenged. Sometimes it just needs to be understood. But it's with her brother that the game's ideas about forgiveness and healing really take form. They haven't seen each other since they were children, so the reunion isn't the sort of clean, sentimental moment most stories would give you. It's tense and it's distant. They share blood, not history, and that absence really defines their relationship. Atsu has lived as a ghost, consumed by revenge, whilst Jibei has lived among people, learned to lead and learned to build. Their lives couldn't be further apart, and the story treats their reconnection with a lot of patience. Over time, they move from strangers to allies and finally to siblings again. Then enters Kiku. Kiku isn't just Jibei's daughter, she's the reflection of everything Atsu lost. She's lighthearted, fearless, and unscarred by the violence that defined Atsu's childhood. Kiku represents a version of Atsu that might have existed if the burning tree had never happened. Every time Kiku speaks with hope or laughs freely, It stings because Atsu remembers when she could do the same. There's this beautiful campfire scene where Atsu, Jibe, and Kiku all share sake together. Atsu just watches. In that flickering firelight, you can see the conflict play across her face. The envy, the longing, the quiet joy of being near something she thought she'd lost forever. For the first time, she isn't chasing revenge. She's just watching what peace looks like. Kiku slowly becomes a mirror to Atsu, protecting Kiku, teaching her, even scolding her at times. It's all part of Atsu relearning how to care, how to nurture that part of herself that she's buried under years of anger and resentment. And that's why the ending hits so hard.
I found something new to live for.
When Atsu finally kills Saito, the last of the Yōtei 6, it's meant to feel cathartic, but it's not. Jibe dies in the process. The revenge is complete, but the cost is unbearable. And yet, this is where the resolution comes. In comforting Kiku, Atsu finally comforts herself. For the first time, she's not the child watching everything burn. She's the only one who can offer warmth, protection, and the reassurance that she never received. Kiku isn't alone, and that is Atsu's story. That's Atsu's redemption. What makes Atsu's journey so remarkable isn't that she kills the Yōtei 6, it's that she grows past the version of herself that needed to. And in that moment, she doesn't just protect Kiku. For the first time since the night of the burning tree, Atsu finds a way to protect herself. If you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like as it really does help me. And if you enjoy investigations into games you love, consider subscribing so I can see you in the next investigation. Thank you for watching.